today. Just a couple of notes before we get started. First, we will be recording this session and sending out a copy afterwards. Secondly, feel free to use the Q&A feature at any time during the discussion to pose questions. We will save them for the end and ask them in the order in which they were received. With that, Vernon, I'll hand things over to you.
Thank you, Petra. Good morning and welcome to our webinar titled Leveraging COVID-19 to Optimize Your Organization's 2021 IT Budget. My name is Vernon Wilson, and I am the Director of Technology Services at Vernovis. Vernovis is a full-service staffing and solutions firm specializing in the areas of information technology, accounting, and finance. We provide staffing and business solutions with a focus on cybersecurity, business technology services, and managed services. I'm excited today. We have a great panel featuring some of Cincinnati's best CIOs. We have Jonathan Towner, Ryan Hale, and Sandy Piscitello. Gentlemen, please introduce yourselves.
Sure. So Jonathan Towner, happy to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to be a part of the panel. I'm the CIO over at LSI Industries, relatively new to the role there. Started in the early part of June. So making a transition in the middle of COVID, was an interesting thing on top of dealing with the impact of COVID to the organizations in general. So happy to be here. Thank you.
All right, Ryan.
Hi, everyone. Ryan Hale, CIO, Lithko Contracting. We are a commercial concrete construction company, 18 locations, kind of scattered across the countryside. Been here for about 6 years and very happy to be here.
And I'm Sandy Piscitello. I'm the CIO at Skidmore Sales and Distributing, a food ingredients company. And I've been there for 2 years. Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen. All right, so we have a few slides that we're going to be referencing today. These are from the 2020 Q4 Gartner Symposium. Let's go ahead and dive in. All right, so gentlemen, this has been a very unique year, right? Challenges that we did not see coming. There are some opportunities potentially hidden in this, as reference to some of the Gartner statistics here. What could you say were some opportunities that the pandemic created for your specific IT departments? Ryan, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not so sure that we're really positioned any different or selling anything different as an IT group itself. I think that the things that we show up to do every day for the organization are probably the same things that they were prior to the pandemic. Our IT and transformation roadmap, it looks exactly the same as it did. It's the same items. I think what the pandemic allowed us to do is better educate those around us how technology and IT could help solve these new business problems that people are encountering, right? More work from home. Well, IT can help with that. We need data or analytics slice and dice slightly different, or we need data that we never really looked at before. Okay, IT can help with that. Or, hey, look, we know that this is going to put pressure on overhead, so we're going to need to figure out ways of automating more processes, or we need to figure out ways of doing more with less, because we know that we're going to have to look to reduce our overhead to maintain competitiveness. Okay, IT can do that. So for us, it was a matter of seeing the opportunity and being able to step up to the table and say, look, here's the things that we can do that we're ready to do. And matter of fact, guys, all of these items were already on the roadmap. So really, we're not talking about anything new and game changing. We didn't make anything new up because, yesterday was pre-COVID and today is post-COVID, but it gave us the opportunity to accelerate some of those items and have discussions around accelerating those and moving those forward in the roadmap to add more business value. And I think my team's done a pretty good job of delivering on those things. So maybe nothing new, just kind of repackaged and repurposed a little bit different way to take advantage of the environment that's in front of us.
I'll jump in a little bit on that one too. I think it changed some of the discussions more than changed the strategy. Our strategies and our roadmaps, to Ryan's point, I think are all very similar. Of following the lines of digital transformation, automation, but it really changed the discussion at the leadership table and made IT more of a partner. I think we've all been striving for that for years and have been kind of around the periphery of being able to do that. And it really forced this IT partnership with the business to the forefront. And so it allowed some conversations that we've been trying to have for years, all happen in a very condensed period of time. So it did accelerate that rate of change, and it did allow us, I think, to put some things in place that we would have ordinarily done over a much more lengthy period. So it changed the discussion, I think, more than anything else.
I think for us, one of the opportunities was particularly with the sales organization. 60-year-old company that's really relied on having strong, close relationships and frequent visits and interactions with their customers were suddenly thrown into a brand new world without a lot of expertise at using tools like Zoom and Microsoft Teams, et cetera. And that became an opportunity for our IT organization to work very closely with their salespeople to help them transform into that new technology to continue to maintain their relationships in a world where they were no longer able to directly visit their customers.
All right, thanks, guys. So what I'm hearing is a trend of, there were some things that are already on the roadmap. Strategies seem to stay pretty solid. Perhaps some auxiliary functions to come in to facilitate the flexible work locations. Taking all that into account, were there any specific areas that you were really able to accelerate in and gain some traction? Jonathan, could you lend to that?
Sure. Specifically for here at LSI, the security piece was an area where we really were able to gain a lot of traction. With everybody kind of dispersing and working from home, the attack vector for a lot of our organizations increased dramatically. And if you notice some of the statistics in the cybersecurity space that, for example, there were, I think, a 500% increase in known attacks right around when COVID really got going and really impacting organizations. There was, 100-fold increase in malicious emails and things like that really drove those actions and accelerated the pace of change for security. We were able to put a lot of things in place that seemed like nice to haves pre-COVID and were must-haves post-COVID.
All right, Ryan, could you share your experience?
Yeah, ours was probably more around the digital transformation kind of stuff. I think over the past 4 years, we've done a pretty good job of moving to the cloud. So the transition to work from home wasn't a big deal for us. Granted, it allowed us to finally justify all that additional cost that we kept getting poked with, that, hey, this cloud stuff's more expensive. Why are we doing this? But hold that aside for a minute, right? That kind of stuff we put in place. And I'll knock on some wood, we'd really increased our security posture over the past few years. So, we've been fairly lucky so far to keep ourselves safe. So for us, it was more around digital transformation. It was around, hey, we know that we still have a lot of back office processes that need automated or need technology solutions. Well, in a pandemic environment with less overhead, you're going to spend less money on back office kind of functions than you would on people building buildings. I mean, that's where we make our money. Everyone else is just sheer overhead. So it allowed us to accelerate some of that, whether it be smaller stuff like, automating onboarding processes, right? Not necessarily something sexy, but when you're hiring 3,500 folks a year, it's certainly time adds up when you're moving around and pushing a lot of paper. It also allowed us to really drive some technology into the hands of our guys building buildings. These guys are construction folks that wear tool belts every day, and you probably wouldn't pick them out of a crowd and say those are the most technology savvy folks necessarily. They haven't had to be, right? They walk around job sites and they look at what needs done, and they organize men in a very efficient manner to do that. The opportunity for us though was, okay, let's make sure all these guys do have iPads. Let's make sure these guys do have data at their fingertips and information as accurate and as quickly as we can get it to them, so that they can make more efficient decisions. Because again, profit margins are lower, competition's tighter, every man hour counts. So let's get them information that they can use, as rapidly as possible to make those decisions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ryan. So when we look at this path of digital transformation, and that it sounds like that there are varying levels among our group here of what that transformation was looking like, where that maturity was, and how we achieved that. Sounds like that we've had some opportunities to accelerate in some of these areas, whether we were forced to or whether we elected to. And really looking at some of the budgetary opportunities as well. I appreciate you bringing that up, Ryan. We've seen this trend through Gartner's statistics you can see here of this increasing advancement of digital business maturity. So how would you explain that in your careers over the past 4 to 5 years in initiating digital maturity and actually achieving it? Love to hear your experience with that and where you started. Was it 4 or 5 years ago? Has it just been in the past couple of years, or has it been in the past couple of months? Sandy, would you care to start us off there?
Sure. I think that it's been probably over the course of the last 3 years where at Skidmore, I think, as a distribution, a wholesale distribution company of food ingredients, the effort has always been to keep your overhead costs as low as possible, so that your price for your products are as competitive as possible. And that tends to, over time, make it difficult from an IT standpoint to get investments in things like digital maturity. I think the advantage from leveraging the COVID environment has been that a lot of the things that we've been pushing and trying to do that maybe felt like or sounded like IT pie in the sky type ideas became very real. The importance of investing in our network, the importance of moving more towards a cloud-based architecture, those things became very real in the COVID environment and played out very well in enabling our workforce to move remote. So this has been a very a boost, if you will, a shot in the arm for advancing these types of things in the context of a real world value. So now when we talk about investing in technology to work with our customers, there's a lot more excitement and enthusiasm versus in the past just talking about how important it is for me to just take my customer to lunch and meet with them. They really realize that they do have to have more technology to interact with their customer base.
Great. Jonathan, do you have anything that you'd like to share?
Sure. And this is, I think, something, and probably most of the people on the call as well, this has been things we've been working on for years at this point. And again, the last few months just accelerated that and just kind of brought to bear that we were heading down the right path. I can speak to this a little more with my prior experience with Mazak, which is where I was prior to LSI. We started that digital transformation more than 3 years ago at this point, probably 4 or 5 years ago, and starting to gear the organization up and rethink the way we do business, striving to be the easiest to do business with. As the consumer world kind of has outpaced the business world in terms of digital transformation, everybody's looking for that Amazon experience, the zero touch, the ability to get whatever you want very quickly. So we put a lot of that groundwork in place at Mazak over the last couple of years. It really came to pass once COVID hit, that able to take a manufacturing business and still operate that in a remote environment for the large part.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Ryan, what has your experience been through achieving digital maturity?
Yeah, we've been on the journey here for a few minutes. I think that the biggest thing, and maybe something that would apply to almost every group on the phone, is it's allowed us to challenge how we roll out technology transformation initiatives, process improvement projects, whatever you want to say there. We, as I mentioned, we're an organization of people that build buildings, so they're very tangible. They like to touch and feel things, as you would imagine, as you can construct a parking garage or a stadium or whatever it may be. So our strategy had historically been, whenever we roll out something new, we need to go to as many of the end users as possible and sit side by side and knee to knee with them and bring them along that journey with us. It was a process that took a lot of time and effort and energy, but we believed it was worth it because it really helped with the user adoption. When now all of a sudden pandemic happens, not only does travel become more difficult to these 18 locations to do that, but it's actually frowned upon, right? Because, especially early on, no one exactly knew transmission and how easily or how difficult or how it happened. So the last thing people want is more people sitting next to them or more people in the job trailer with them. And from an IT standpoint, the last thing we wanted is, IT guys show up to roll out something new, and then all of a sudden a large job gets shut down and you have 100 people that now can't go to work for the next week or 2 weeks or whatever it may be. So it really drove us to adopt different ways, more virtual ways of training and getting buy-in and having conversations and rolling out initiatives. And quite frankly, even once the pandemic is over, I'm not sure we'll ever truly go back to the way we were before, because it is so much more efficient now. And we've seen that we can roll out big transformational initiatives, big technology insertion kind of things, a lot easier, a lot cheaper, and a lot quicker. So I think that's probably something for everyone on the call to kind of rethink the way that they've pushed things out in the past and see if this pandemic gives them an opportunity to do it differently.
Kind of echo some of that for some prior experience as well. If you look at some of the transformations that we made, when we rolled from Lotus Notes over to O365 and Exchange, that was a long, painful process, very lengthy training, creation of all kinds of documentation around what it looked like in Notes, what it looks like now in Exchange and Outlook, multiple training sessions, very, very heavy IT push. However, just a few, 12, 16, 18 months later, whatever it was, when COVID hit, we pushed teams out almost overnight and very little training, very little, IT push, a lot of pull from the organization. And so it almost feels that we're hitting a tipping point to where, the user base and their acceptance of change is increasing and their ability to self-help is increasing. And so hopefully that's a trend that sticks with us, that will make our rollouts much easier as we go forward.
Great, thanks for adding that, Jonathan. I'd like to stay on this slide for another moment here. I know we kind of started looking at this this time frame of 4 to 5 years and how we landed here. I'm very interested to know what your experience has been, not just pre-COVID to COVID, but really now that we're in it and looking at your 2021 budgeting processes and tying that to this maturity, how has that changed for you, if at all? And I'd like to go through the same order if we could. So Sandy, when you sat down and looked at what 2021 was going to look like, what your goals were, and specifically around budgeting, did you see that funds were able to be reallocated, or did you see that there was more of an investment that was willing to be made in addition to the interest that you're seeing from the company?
Yeah, it's been actually more more of an investment for us, and also a very clear directive to myself and the IT organization to step up and take the lead on helping the organization identify opportunities to advance in digital maturity. that's sort of a new posture. Sort of saying, help us understand where we can even be better and how we can survive in this new world. Help come up with the ideas, use your network to bring those to us. That's a new emphasis, if you will, in a collaboration between IT and the business in a partnership type fashion.
Thank you, Sandy. Ryan, could you share anything in terms of 2021 and the budgeting process?
Yeah, I think for us, it's been less justification of IT spend. And quite frankly, I think we as an IT team have been responsible to not see the opportunity and say, oh, this is a great opportunity to go spend additional dollars, because we realize that 2021 is going to bring new budgetary pressures, new competition pressures, new margin pressures that we haven't seen before. So, budget is holding flat for us, but I think we're positioned to do more with the same, and have gotten very little pushback that we are not decreasing our budget, or why aren't you cutting your budget by 5% or 10% or whatever the number may be. The past couple of years, it's always been a bit of a knife fight kind of towards the end. I think we've always been conservative with our budgeting, but then there's always this arm wrestling match that occurs kind of at the end to squeeze out as many nickels as we can. And that's fine. That's part of the exercise. I haven't felt that so far this year. So I think that goes exactly to what we've been saying here is IT's value is probably looked at as being increased. I think we've made some strategic decisions this year to spend money that'll carry over to next year, and no one's going to argue those at this stage. Yeah. So far so good. No knife fights.
That is great news. Jonathan, would you like to weigh in?
Sure. With LSI, we're a July 1 fiscal, so I actually have not been through the 21 budgeting process as of yet. But I anticipate a similar experience, that certainly less knife fights, which is healthier for everybody. But one of the things that I think I'll anticipate is saying, there's a pool of funds that an organization is used to spending with travel and expense and the entertainment and things like that aren't being spent in this world, and hoping to instead of taking 100% of that to the bottom line, make an ask that maybe we take 20 or 30% of that savings and reinvest that in IT. A lot of things in order to with cloud and other technologies, you can lower your overall operating cost once you invest to get there. And I think a lot of organizations are facing that difficulty of swallowing that pill that I've got to spend a decent amount of money to over time spend less money. And so I think there's an opportunity here to make that argument that now is the time to do that, so that when we come out of these things that we're more profitable on the back end, to leverage better tools and reduce internal costs.
That's a great point. And the ability to recognize that there may be some funds that aren't being used. Like you said, there are some areas there that I think that not everybody would readily recognize as opportunities to bring into the conversation. So I really appreciate you sharing that, Jonathan.
Sure.
All right, as we go on to the next slide here, then we're going to see something that Gartner puts out here. And I love this visual. It speaks to driving the enterprise strategy here. I'm going to ask the panel, how has COVID helped you gain traction in pushing a project from initiation to maturity? I know we've dropped some pieces along the way that really lend to this, but I'd love to hear real examples of either something that was on the docket to be done or something that was moving along and then got accelerated. If we go back to kind of our thoughts around that previous question and to this model here that we see in front of us. So Ryan, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So, and I've kind of mentioned a couple of them, right? We were in the process of rolling out QR codes on each of our team members' hard hats. So we got 3,500 team members scattered across a couple hundred projects at any given time. And we believe that if we can get, if we could get QR codes on their helmets and we could tie that to an initial initiative that would allow people to understand, look, this isn't crazy sci-fi kind of stuff. It would allow us this roadmap to do a lot of other things with those QR codes and tracking and things of that nature, data in the future. So we were on this process of, okay, we're going to need every person. And I know this sounds very rudimentary, but you got to remember, if you go back and look at a McKinsey study that's a couple years old, of all the key industries across the United States, construction was second from the bottom in terms of technology adoption, only to agriculture. So when you talk about the opportunity to make a big splash in digital transformation, by God, construction provides that opportunity, just because, if anything, they've been such technology laggards overall, for years and years and years. So, put QR codes on individuals' hard hats, because at the end of the day, they show up every day with a hard hat to do the job safely, and have them scan in, scan out allows us to answer some safety or some health related questions at the time of clock in and clock out for the day. And it really helps the data flow from those trailers in the field back to the offices, where time's put into our ERP system. It helps with updating job cost information every day, so they get real-time budget to actual information, those kind of things, let alone all the cool stuff that I can give us in the future. So we were on the road of rolling that out, and prior to COVID, we'd been doing that for 6 or 9 months, literally job by job at a time. We would travel to a location, we would spend a couple weeks there, we would bounce around to all of their jobs one by one, teaching and training individuals, and then we'd fly back home and regroup and get a little bit of sleep, and then we would go do it at the next business unit. And we had 18 business units kind of plotted over the series of 18 months. And then COVID happens, and travel restrictions occur, and people don't want us around, as I alluded to earlier, because we've got germs and things of that nature. So, okay, now how are we going to do this differently? So we went literally completely virtual, and we were able to get 14 business units, which would have probably taken us the better part of 14 months to do. We did all 14 business units. We deployed them, got them completely up and running on the system in about 6 months, because we did embrace Teams and Zoom and various things of that nature to train and to get people used to the system. Yes, it was more logistics, because now we're shipping QR codes and iPads and stuff all over the countryside. But I'd rather let FedEx do the work than have my guys running around and taking flights everywhere and driving to all these job sites. So very real example of, cut the rollout timeline by 60 or 70%. And it's allowed us to really look at our information flow and even our back office staff that touches a lot of that information and do some different things with them, reduce overhead in areas. So it was a big win, all in the name of COVID, because it allowed us to challenge the status quo by which we would normally roll out initiatives. And I could go on and give you another 2 or 3, but I know Sandy and Jonathan are probably anxious to jump in on this same conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ryan. Sandy, would you care to share?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I've noticed, Vernon, has been a change in the strategic level of our portfolio management, or what we call our governance process around projects. In the past, there was a lot of, step level improvements or enhancement requests to the ERP and things like that. And now it's moved into a much more strategic discussion about, return on investment and, how do we pick the best ideas to advance, our making us easier to do business with, as well as Jonathan mentioned with the, the Amazon experience. It's really shifting the discussion into a more strategic level and away from the old world of, can we do 80 enhancements this year to, how do we accomplish 4 or 5 very strategic projects that really move the needle?
All right, great. So we're seeing some trends, with the uncertainty that COVID brought on. Our industry has seen the ability for some opportunity, that opportunity in accelerating projects, that opportunity in capturing some of the budget to drive some of the technology. As we move to the next topic here, how have all of these pieces come together to help you leverage COVID to solidify your seat at the leadership table? Were you invited in? Did you have to throw a couple elbows to get your seat there? What did this look like pre-COVID, and as we've moved through the quarantines and the work from homes to where we're sitting now? I'd love to hear everyone share their story about getting that seat at the table. Jonathan, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. Well, I mean, as I mentioned kind of earlier on, I made a transition in the middle of this, and as a result, was pretty much invited to that table. But again, I think it did change the discussion. From being a group that was primarily relied upon to keep the green blinky lights green and blinky to an organization that can really help business and be a partner there and really enable the business to thrive through something like this. I'd be interested to see, how many of the organizations have this IT function truly have a C-level role in a lot of our companies. I mean, I think a lot of the companies here are in that small to medium-sized business, and so before and after, do we see an increase in, that executive position in the companies in our group here? And again, it was more, the conversations changed. We didn't have to stake our case. We didn't have to do all the, trying to justify things like SD-WAN because we like to say different letters and acronyms. They understood that we were putting building blocks in place to allow a business to function in our virtual world. So it certainly changed the dynamic at the table, more so than having to get a seat at the table.
Yeah, and Jonathan, I think you brought up something really important there, right? Is that the way that this slide is that we're looking at is formulated. It's specifying CIOs, but not all companies have a C-level IT leader, right? So regardless if that's a manager or a director or a VP or a CIO, would your advice be the same in getting to that table, regardless of what that title is? Whoever is leading the initiatives for IT, how important is that they are sitting at the table?
Oh, it's absolutely critical, and I think it takes someone that understands business as much as technology. That isn't necessarily somebody that's got their hands on keyboard, that's worried on zeros and ones and bits and bytes. They can really translate that into business value. So I know my role is much more of that that liaison, that advisor, that go between the technical world and the business world, and being able to prove out the value in the business sense for the technology we're trying to bring in the door.
Great. Ryan, what would you say to, if you just look at everything that we've talked about with Jonathan holistically, what would your feedback be?
Yeah, I would piggyback on what Jonathan just said. There's an old saying that I don't know who said it, but they were smarter than I am. And it goes something like, the business won't do what the business doesn't understand. And I think we as IT professionals, as IT leaders, sometimes can get in our own way because we want to sound like the smartest guy at the table with a bunch of letters and acronyms that no one else understands but us. And that's a fatal flaw, right? And I think the opportunity that COVID has presented is it's now bringing more IT leadership to the table, because folks are realizing in a virtual environment, you need IT more, right? So I think the biggest key for us to impress upon ourselves as a community is you don't need to sound like the smartest guy at the table. You need to be the best translator. And that's kind of what Jonathan was saying. If you can translate the best between what it actually takes to get something done, and you can talk to the finance guys and the marketing guys and the operation guys in words they can understand, you're influencing something. You're truly doing something at that stage. And then it's not a fight and throwing elbows to get to the table. It's a welcome into the table, because they're not so intimidated by all your nerdy speak, and you're not isolating them and with all your speak that they don't understand. I guess would be my only advice. It's get to the table by speaking their language and making it easy for them to understand, not, oh, Jesus, man, I got to go sit in a conversation with the IT guy, which I'm only going to understand 4% of it.
Very good points. Thank you, Ryan. Sandy, would you like to add to this?
Yeah, business acumen is clearly front and center. I think about how COVID has accelerated. My CEO and myself have had numerous discussions now that we haven't had in the past. They're proactive discussions with some of our suppliers who supply us with the ingredients, as well as some of our key customers, where we've had discussions with them on how can we do business with you and make things easier and more efficient, and how can we add more value to the supply chain for you. Those kinds of proactive discussions didn't happen as much in the past because the feeling was, well, if there's something that they really want from us, they'll ask, they'll tell us. And that's really not the case, because things change so quickly in the business world that you can find yourself obsolete if you don't proactively reach out. So starting to have those discussions, and that being accelerated by the importance of having that proactive outreach in a COVID type environment is really making the difference. And it's also helped guide our B2B strategic items for 2021, and based on exactly what our suppliers and our customers are asking to have access to directly and in a more efficient way.
I would add, Vernon, that everything the three of us just said was less about IT and more about business acumen. I think Sandy's words were, and I think that's a great term there. It puts certainly more onus on us as IT leadership if we want to maintain that seat at the table. As we grow IT leadership behind us, it puts a lot of onus on us to figure out how to get them that education, because that business education of being able to speak a little finance, a little marketing, a little operations kind of stuff isn't something that's taught in your courses as you're coming up through school learning IT stuff, right? Or your first jobs in IT. Not many people are pulling you aside and saying, hey, yeah, I get it, you can write code, but why exactly are we writing that code? And can you tell me what the business case is and what this means to the business with the code you're writing? So it kind of takes the way that IT professionals have been developed in the past and kind of flips it on its head a little bit if we're going to maintain our spot at that table and grow these numbers for partnering and trusted allies. Because it's not just all of a sudden the three of us that are sitting on this panel that need to be having those conversations with leadership. It's our next level down folks that need to be having the conversations with their peers, and the folks below that need to be having the conversation with their peers in words they can understand and business speak that they can relate to.
That's a wonderful point. So, to our audience, there were a really great takeaway here. Ryan did a good job at summarizing it here and pointing it out. But if your mind is not to align with the business and be business first in your technology approach, it may be something you want to step back and reconsider. All right, so far, we're looking at opportunities for redirecting funding, accelerating projects, being business minded here, getting that seat at the table, and being fully aligned with the business. Now we have this work from home situation. How do you think that that's going to really affect the way that we interact with each other, not just supporting everyone that's out working from home? I think we've covered that, but what do you think this looks like, and how do you build a team? I know that in some preliminary stuff that we talked about here, it's one thing to take a team that and send everybody home and manage that. That has all of its own challenges. But then to look forward and potentially build a team in this manner, where do we start? Who has experience with this already, or where have your thoughts been around it? Sandy, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
That's probably my biggest concern, because we've made the shift to work from home. We're functioning. We're doing well still as a business, but what is it doing to the effectiveness of our teams? What does it do to recent hires? And are they feeling as connected to the organization as they should and could? Are they building those long-lasting relationships that allow them to accomplish the most that they can accomplish? In the short term, some of the things that we have done is we have set up some team meetings that really have nothing to do with specific business items, et cetera. We call the regular weekly meeting water cooler chat. And anybody can kind of join and just talk about what's going on in their life, and what are some things that they're dealing with, et cetera. And it's intended to be what it is. I mean, you used to maybe gather at the water cooler in the past, and this is now an opportunity to get on Teams and people share some pictures of what's going on, and you just get that more personal side of people as opposed to just interacting with them in just a business context all the time. I don't advocate that takes the place of the human interaction, but it does fill the gap in the world that we're in right now.
Thank you. Jonathan.
Yeah, and I think to kind of echo some of what Sandy was saying, it puts the onus on us as leaders to really make that effort. That's not, it used to happen organically in the office. Walking by, conversation would happen, you'd hear something, you jump in, you'd see people's pictures, their kids and things on their desk. Those things, as you're bringing new people into an organization in a virtual world, you have to make that happen. You have to really put the onus on yourself to create those opportunities for those discussions to happen. And where this is going long term, is anybody's guess, truly. But my personal belief is this is not going to settle on a pure remote thing. I think it's probably going to settle in some sort of a hybrid model. Because I think over time people are going to crave that human interaction, and so when we go back to the office, maybe it leads to a significant increase in flex time or flexible work schedules rather than pure remote. Because I think, to your point, Vernon, it certainly is one thing to take a team that knows each other, that knows each other's rhythms and habits, and send them home versus onboarding and exiting people into a team that's only at home. Very different scenario.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Ryan, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I wish I could add a lot of value on this one, Vernon. I'm not sure I can. I'm more in learning mode from other smart guys like Sandy and Jonathan and others that are in my network, because I don't have this figured out yet. We don't pay the most compared to peers and others, so we've always attracted folks to our team, not because they're going to make the most money and buy a Rolls Royce after the first year they work here, but instead based on the team dynamic and the team culture, whether it be happy hours or going to games or golfing or unlimited PTO or whatever it may be. And now all of a sudden, when you take folks that aren't sitting around each other in the office every day and you break that like we have, how long does the fabric of that culture last? And I guess I've been lucky so far that I haven't had any turnover on my team, so I haven't had to deal with onboarding a new individual. But I'm not real sure how I'm going to do it and how it's really going to work in a remote environment, and how we're going to build that same kind of team-based feel and culture where everyone's hanging outside of work and people are having each other's families over for dinner and stuff like that. So I wish I had a better answer, but I'm learning from other smart people. I don't know.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for sharing that. When we look at that challenge, then the next challenge that we're potentially seeing here is around talent retention and hiring. We've already recognized that there are some challenges in potentially building a team that doesn't get that water cooler time, right? But then we look at other costs, right? That there's potentially an individualistic cost for employees and working from home. As we look at the new landscape and what that potentially may look like, when we look at the salary growth that was anticipated in our field and what we've experienced through time in our field, when you look at all of these factors here, has that changed your strategy around your talent retention and hiring processes? And I'll open up the floor to anyone that wants to raise their hand for this one.
So this one, this one's a challenge for me. This one is a huge concern, and it goes, I think, a little bit beyond this too. Of how do you retain that talent? If you look at some of the big nameplates, the coastal nameplates, the Facebooks and Googles and things like that, I worry a little bit that we're going to become potentially a hunting ground for them because our salaries comparatively are lower than the coastal ones, and so do they come try to pick our teams apart and offer that pure remote scenario? So this one I don't have a good answer for it, but it's a huge concern for me, and I think it's something that we all need to be thinking about and preparing for. And my hope is that people do miss that connectedness to the business, and that they still want that physical presence to an extent to offset some of that. But I'm happy to let Ryan or Sandy jump in and hopefully offer a little more insight than I have at this point.
Well, one example that I'd like to share, we did onboard a new systems administrator to our team, and she was brought in right in the middle of this and has been pretty much a virtual employee since joining. And my concern was, like I've sort of stated before, was her connectedness to the rest of the organization. I actually chose to align her to a manager on my team that, for personal reasons, about 3 years ago had to move to Salt Lake City, and he's been remote for 3 years, and he's gotten a lot of experience at how to navigate those waters. And by aligning her to him as her manager, I think that's really helped her because he always has ideas and thoughts on how to effectively interact with the organization when you're not always physically there. It's a little thing, but it's helped make a difference for her.
All right, thank you, Sandy. All right, and as we move to the last slide that we have today, this is kind of tying everything that we've talked about together. Again, just an overall recap of capturing opportunity, getting that seat at the table, accelerating your projects, aligning with the business, and now with talent retention, promoting being social, even if we're social distance, while we're being social. And Jonathan brought up a great point here, and geographical boundaries may be gone, right? So how is that going to affect a hotbed of talent that we have in the Midwest here around technology, when we have the coastal areas on each side that have a much higher cost of living and other attributes that are no longer necessarily going to be prohibitive to those companies that are based there and reaching into our talent pool. So looking at all of this as a whole, what advice, and I'd love for each of you to weigh in on this, what advice would you give to the other CIOs and IT leaders and really any of the other participants in our audience today?
I'd say continue to focus on employee engagement, because the more engaged a person is, the more connected they feel to the organization, and that's a second home for them, the less likely they are to move elsewhere. So, give them that experience, do what you can to schedule events and things like that still bring people together, even if it's on a technology platform. But try to really focus on that employee engagement aspect of things that make people feel like they belong to something special.
That's great. Thank you, Sandy. Jonathan.
Yeah, kind of to evolve that a little bit and go with that thought, that train of thought, it's getting outside of your comfort zone. These are things that traditionally IT folks haven't really focused on, or the soft side of the business, the soft skills, the interpersonal relationships. Taking a vested interest in someone as a person, not just as an ability to produce code, and really enhancing that, and also stretching your boundaries in that business sense. Having that ability to translate business value from your technology into business value. So it's a lot of really challenging yourself to do things differently than we have in the past.
Thank you, Jonathan. Ryan?
Well, my friend Jonathan Towner once told me, "Don't let a good crisis go to waste." So I think as 2021 comes and budget season is here, I think, look at what you've got on your roadmap, look at what you've got in your backlog that you've always wanted to do, but haven't been able to necessarily get full traction for. The item probably hasn't changed, but the way that it could be deployed or the way that you can sell it to the organization, because there's business value there. But it hasn't been able to be sold or spun in the right way before. I think this is a great opportunity to do it. It's a true opportunity for IT to step up and help accelerate business value in a lot of different places. And my guess is all of us could look around our organizations and find 5 or 10 of those. So don't let a good crisis go to waste.
It's a great saying. I'll definitely keep that in mind.
I owe Jonathan $5 now.
I'm pretty sure there's somebody a heck of a lot smarter than I am that first said that. So it's got a Winston Churchill feel to it. So.
All right. At this time, we'd like to go ahead and open up the floor for any questions that we may have.
I'll have a question that I can get us started with. Okay, as a technology leader, how have you successfully navigated these types of conversations with CEOs or owners that don't see IT as an enabler to the business, but view it more as a cost center? And you can speak in the hypothetical if you don't want to throw your CEO or owner under the bus. But if anyone wants to, tackle that question.
Yeah, I'll start. I think it's very important that the conversations that you have from a technology standpoint are anchored in what is that business leader, that CEO's pain point, what keeps them awake at night, what do they worry about, what's on their nightmare list, and how is what you're proposing going to solve that problem for them, or at least move it down the road in a positive way. And if the conversation is anchored in those types of things, that person will listen to you.
And if you can monetize it just a smidgen, even if you're not exactly correct, that helps even more.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's definitely helpful. I think in any conversation, trying to, customize it to the person you're speaking to and what really is a pain point for them is a good piece of advice. Okay, and then this one you have kind of touched on it, but if you maybe have any specific examples that you could share with people, how do I best discern the impact IT transformation can have on our business long term? What are the steps you've taken to identify and showcase this value?
So when I'm looking at a project, a digital transformation project, I spend a lot of time working with the people that are in those roles, that would be affected by it, understanding kind of what their process is, swim lane activities, things like that, to understand, if we put this technology in place, what comes out of that process, and then working with the business to understand. I mean, everybody has their own kind of business burden rate. So, if I can take X number of hours out of a process times how many times this process is done, then, you get to Ryan's point of being able to monetize that a little bit, and it helps to offset the cost. It's one of those, I like to go into a scenario like that, knowing that I'm going to pay for the investment upfront, so that it's more of an informational thing than it is an ask and a selling thing.
Yeah, I would echo what Jonathan said there at the beginning. Technology projects, the majority of the time, I mean, unless you're upgrading a server, whatever, the majority of technology projects or digital transformation projects actually aren't really about technology at all. They're about the process, improving that process, understanding how people will interact with that new process and how their day or their lives will be better or easier or more efficient, how data and information then needs to flow so those people have the right metrics to make better decisions. oh, and then there happens to be this technology thing that makes it all happen, I think is the way you've got to think about it. Technology is the third leg of that stool, where people and process are the first two.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, we still have quite a few people on here. If anyone has any other questions they want to throw out, you know, you can choose a specific panelist to call out or something general. But if not, we might be able to wrap things up early here. Vernon, do you have anything else that you'd want to add? Or?
Yeah, I'm curious if everyone could share what they're currently seeing, either with their organizations or other organizations. In the what do you think the future strategy looks like in terms of, you know, all the when restrictions are potentially lifted here, and is everyone going to return to the office? Do you anticipate the continued investment in a bricks and mortar? Do you see a more flexible workspace or you know, working model from work from home? I'd love to hear from anyone that wants to chime in on that.
Yeah, I don't think that if it was to return to everybody come back into the office, that you would be able to attract and retain talented employees. I think people working from home is now an expectation among talented people in the workforce. And I think Jonathan said it earlier that we'll probably return to more of a hybrid model. And, you know, I just think that, you know, another way to articulate the benefits of that is, you know, we were just before COVID landed looking at office expansion needs, if you will, because we were running out of office space. That problem's solved now. So, you know, balancing a hybrid model will be what's effective, and rotating people through that model so that they spend some time in the office and also get to spend time working from home will be the competitive edge that will allow you to attract and retain the best talent.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sandy. Jonathan or Ryan, do you have anything to add or any opposition?
I can agree more.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think one of the big challenges we're going to face is a lot of our organizations take a one-size-fits-all approach with respect to policy and governance, especially in the HR areas. You know, so how do you manage that? Because you know, job function, especially in the IT space, is different than someone, you know, on the shop floor turning a wrench. You know, those people have to be here. However, in many cases, our organizations are set that those HR policies are universal. And so, you know, how do you work with the other business leaders to influence that, you know, policy setting to allow for an organization to capitalize on that competitive advantage that Sandy just mentioned?
All right.
Okay, sorry, Vernon, were you gonna throw this one out? I got a question from the audience here. How have you approached enhancing people's soft skills, especially given the new remote work dynamics, which will continue even in a hybrid model?
I just was looking at that on the side here, and that's a great question, because one of the downsides of people being more on a technology platform, and they get this from their social media experience, is people can tend to be a lot more abrupt and a lot less tactful in communicating with each other in a technology platform. And so enhancing the soft skills, and I definitely leverage my one-on-one meetings with my team to talk about those opportunities, to make sure that we think even harder about how we're approaching people and how we put the customer first in those interactions, because it you know, left alone, there are some downsides to technology and media communications that really carry over from social media.
That's a very good question.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I feel like I'm trying to force the pendulum the other way. Now that we're all virtual, I'm trying to force it more towards picking up the phone, making the video call, whatever it may be, just to account for that, because now it's so easy for everyone to sit with their laptop on their lap while they're watching a show, you know, banging away on Microsoft Teams or Instant Messenger or chat or whatever you use, right? So No. Let's pick up the phone. Let's talk to each other like humans. I feel like I repeat that 20 times more than I ever did before now, just to try to compensate. It's challenged. It's a great question.
All right. Well, I see that we are out of time here. I want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us. I want to particularly thank our panel here. Gentlemen, thank you for being a part of this. Couldn't have done it without you. Really appreciate the insight that you shared. Overall, to everyone out in the audience, there are some things here that we heard today that are not going to go away, even when the restrictions are lifted, right? Get aligned with the business, get that seat at the table, be business minded here, and stay focused on how to accelerate and move with technology to the business. So with that, we could go ahead and conclude today's webinar, and a big thank you to all.
Thank you.